You know, one of the emphasis in Imam Gulen's teachings that I think really underlies a lot of the work of the dialogue organizations and education, social service, media, business, is this idea that all humans are fundamentally alike and that the ultimate membership in this world created by God or Allah is human. In Turkey, traditionally since the Republic. So in that case, I mean, you know, and my sense of how Hizmet activities connect Turkey to the world is very strong. To touch Turkish. Well, my name is Peter Kovach. I'm a retired American diplomat. I've worked largely in the Muslim world. I'm also an interfaith activist. I believe in not only dialogue, but social action coming from cooperation for the common good. Hizmet's contribution to interfaith dialogue is particularly strong among Muslim movements I'm aware of. But I would say in general what dialogue does, especially in conflict situations or situations of suspicion of the other, the different person, is it takes religion, it neutralizes religion as a factor. I will say this outright. I think there are very few conflicts in this world, even ones that our journalists would label religious conflicts, that are really religious. They're usually about unfulfilled needs, about economic insecurity, social insecurity, insecurity of identity, and because religion is that convenient, slightly abstract form of identity, it's what people cling on to. It's an identity that's kind of, it transcends your neighborhood. You wrap yourself in its flag and your mantle. But you know, sometimes you have to do business with people on the other side of Istanbul. And you know, that's true all over the world. It was true in central Nigeria, where there was Christian-Muslim tension that was taken out very much on a religious ground until an imam and a Christian pastor met each other from towns that had burned each other down and said, enough. Our problem is the central government and that we aren't getting the adequate services and goods and economic attention from them. And they started a movement that went countrywide and turned things around. The government had to pay attention to that region with its developmental programs and monies. So I think that's why dialogue is particularly important, because people often confuse conflict as fundamentally religious when I think it rarely is. The other thing is that religions tend to have pretty much the same universal values. And I say this as someone that's done fairly serious study in 5 or 6 of the world's traditions. The love thy neighbor, the if Allah had wanted to make us alike, he would have. So he made us into tribes and nations so mankind could go out and know one another. Or in the Hebrew Bible, be kind to the stranger, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. It's all there. It's there in Buddhism. It's there in Hinduism. And so if you take those universal values, you get over all the hesitancy you have to sit down with the other, the religious other. Then you have that dialogue, but then you have to say, so what? Okay, we're talking, and that's what the Hizmet does so brilliantly. So what? So let's engage in social action through Kimse Yok Mu. Or let's send our kids to a great STEM high school when they're in a lousy local school. Or let's, if I'm a small entrepreneur and I'm trying to develop skills and contacts, let me work with Tuscan. You know, one of the emphasis in Imam Gulen's teachings that I think really underlies a lot of the work of the dialogue organizations and education, social service, media, business, is this idea that all humans are fundamentally alike and that the ultimate membership in this world created by God, or Allah, is human. It's not Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu. It's human. And I think that basis and that assertion, which is very frequent in his teachings, corresponds to the great teachings of certainly the Sufi mystics and Rumi, not the least of them. In terms of Hizmet drawing in a wide variety of people in this country from different religious traditions, I would say is that I've never for a minute felt like anyone at a Hizmet gathering was trying to proselytize me or turn me into a Muslim. I think people feel, and that's probably, whether I were to go to a Christian similar kind of group or Hindu or Jewish, that's the first thing I would be suspicious of as an American. Someone's trying to convert me. And I think that no one I know with very strong grounding in other religious traditions that comes to dialogue or otherwise works with Hizmet, I think we all get over that really early. It just doesn't happen. That our tradition is respected, our difference is respected, and there's no attempt to impose a particular framework, and certainly not Sharia law. But the only framework that's imposed is God's greatest gift, which is rationality, and it's a human endowment. I think Hizmet's emphasis on education is extremely important in this world. In our country right now, we're having a general breakdown of our lower education system. Our universities are still terrific, but we're having a crisis. And I think one of the things people feel schools are not doing is teaching critical thinking, whether it's in the science, technology, education, engineering, and math field, or in literature and social science. And the Gulen-inspired schools do exactly that. They teach people how to critically think. Let me give you an example from far-off Tajikistan. I went out to Tajikistan with the U.S. Embassy a few years ago to fill in for a few months as the cultural attaché. We had an American corner, which is kind of like an American library with computers, books, and programs in Dushanbe. And it was one of the only things really for young people to do in Dushanbe. We got large groups of people, and I lectured 3 times. I was a civil rights activist, so I talked about the civil rights movement in America. I got all my colleagues in the embassy that had a expertise or a hobby outside of their boring jobs in the embassy to come and give a talk. And I was the host, whether I was a speaker or not. And I noticed that that every time we did a talk, there were a few kids that would come and ask very, very good questions that showed that they were able to think about what was said and take their thinking to the next step. Well, afterwards, we always had refreshments, and I would always make a point of talking to the most intelligent kids because, to me, that's the most interesting. Almost 100% of the people at probably 30 programs over those months asking those questions were from the Gulen school. There's only one Gulen school in Dushanbe. I found that amazing. If I were to multiply out the percentages, it would be like 3% of probably the audiences were asking those questions, and almost 2.80 of the 3% were from the Gulen school. I will talk about how Hizmet's activities do contribute to Turkey's image. I think they do, and it's all to the positive. I can be parochial initially and talk as an American. Now, in America, the First Amendment of our Constitution mandates that there shall be no state religion or no state interference in the practice of a religion. So religious freedom and no state religion. But I would say, even though there are points of tension in our country, we're probably less uncomfortable with mixing of spiritual elements in civic life than in Turkey traditionally since the Republic. So in that case, and I'll point out again that it was a Jewish rabbi that took me to the first Hizmet meeting I ever went to. And you meet rabbis, and you meet Catholic clerics, and you meet evangelicals, and you meet quite a variety of Muslims, I will say, the non-Turks that I've met at Hizmet meetings, including Shia, including people that, you wouldn't quite expect. So, yeah, I think for us, Hizmet really sort of reinforces the kind of American church-state, mosque-state balance. So it's comfortable for us in this country. We don't feel threatened at all by the fact that it's inspired by the teachings of a Muslim imam. My sense of how Hizmet activities connect Turkey to the world is very strong. And I mean, in Turkey, I look at Sultan Ahmet, that hill in Istanbul, which for 1,000 years was the center of the Western world. For 500 years, Byzantine Christianity, and for 500 years, Ottoman Islam. And to me, that's kind of that should be a dialogue island. Just the fact that that's there and it's at the heart of touristic Istanbul, and it's something that I think Turks are immensely proud of. Turkey symbolically is at a great crossroads, and I think the fact that these activities reach out and that they're business connections, and I am a great believer in enterprise as an engine of development, not just convenience. I don't believe that business is selfish. I think it's the ultimate engine of economic growth. So, I mean, the fact that Tuscan goes out and makes business connections for Turkey, I think is something that Turks should feel very, very comfortable about. And I hope that there's some other civil society organizations, not necessarily connected with Hizmet, that are doing the same thing. Turkey has a huge role to play in this world. It's a big country. It's economically powerful. It's relatively educated. And it has this wonderful tradition of Islamic teachers who are incredibly open-minded and are teaching a kind of living in the moment. God's endowment is the mind. The mind has this interpretive capability, and the main act of interpretation as the rule of life is change. I mean, that's the law of life, is to ride the change in the spirit of the teachings. And I mean, I look at Rumi that way, I look at Said Nursi that way, I look at Fethullah Gulen that way. I think that's terrific, and I think it redounds to Turkey's reputation abroad. Well, the question is the current problems Hizmet is having in Turkey. And at the beginning of this interview, I vowed not to touch Turkish politics, but the fact is I've always been interested in Turkish politics even before I even knew that Hizmet existed. And you know what I would say is that I would hope people have perspective. I would say this especially to my secular friends around Istanbul, and if any of you are watching, you know who you are, that this is a modern, progressive, forward-looking movement within the tradition that you were raised around, if not in. And I know what that means because I was raised in a similar traditional home. I really think that, I've talked to political scientists that are neither Hizmet related nor Turkish, and they say, talk about the Turkish deep state. There are probably 15 or 20 organizations that, depending on your point of view, could be pointed to as the deep state. And as an American, we have our own little style of conspiracy theories, but not quite as strongly as you all do. I would just say, take a deep breath. The Hizmet vote, I've heard described as maybe between 5 and 10% of the vote. It's not a vote that's going to really change much. I think it's important for people to have perspective, and I would encourage people to look at Mr. Gulen's teachings. He has written prolifically. He may be kind of a distant figure in public, but I will tell you, he is there in his writings, and he's there in what's been created in his name. And there's an awful lot to look at, and so I would urge you to look at that. One of the intriguing things about Imam Gulen's teaching, to me as a student of Buddhism and Hinduism, which have a very heavy emphasis philosophically on getting rid of ego or nafs, is how strongly that's emphasized in Imam Gulen's teaching.
The Hizmet movement seeks to bring peace. Peace through understanding, peace through respect, and therefore love of our fellow people, regardless of where they live or what their faith traditions are.